We are Be Well Health and Wellness Consultants, and we're inviting you into our toughest and most honest conversations with each other.
We believe in honest, educated, science-based health promotion and that everyone should have access to this kind of information.
Tune in to hear our hearts for you as we uncover the not-so-pretty side of the health and wellness industry on the Healthy is Hard podcast. Welcome back to the Healthy is Hard podcast. Tony, it's good to see you again. We are just coming off of Christmas 2020, and we have a very exciting episode for you today. Tony, what are we talking about today?
The keto diet.
Oh, yes, the much anticipated episode, opinions, research from your favorite nutritional and exercise scientists. So we have a lot of ground to cover. We're going to try and keep it within our 30 to 45 minute length so that we can get you all the best information in a generally decent amount of time because we could talk about this stuff seriously all day long. We have some very strong feelings about it. So if you do as well, please leave us a comment on Facebook, Instagram, leave us a review on the show. We would love to hear from you. Send us a message. You can find all of our contact info in the description of this podcast. We're excited to start this conversation because we feel that it is very necessary to talk about this if we're going to be transparent about health and wellness. So this is going to be one of many diets, restrictive eating plans that we will cover over the course of this podcast, but we thought this was the best one to dive into because it is the one that I know, speaking for myself at least, see the most amount of pushback on. Tony, I don't know about you, but people love to tell me why the science is wrong on this diet.
Yeah, it's very misguided, misdirected, however you want to put that title onto it. Nobody really does the proper way, if that makes sense. You still utilize a lot of processed foods. They still don't consume the right amount of calories for their body. They're not performing well. Then they feel terrible. So it's good to know exactly how the diet started, how it actually works, what's actually going on in your body, how you can use that fuel to exercise, and how to actually live happy and not dread your life through a diet.
Yes, that is exactly what we're going to cover. So let's dive into the history. I have a lot of research for you guys today because this is such an emotional topic. I feel that it is just absolutely critical to give you literally the research, the journals, the studies that are done on this so that you can not only hear it from a professional standpoint, but also go and do your own research. So all of these references that we will be sharing will be cited and given to you in a link in the show notes for this episode. Be sure to check that out. I know it's really easily visible on Spotify and Apple platforms, but if you need them in a separate link, again, please feel free to message us. We want you to have this information. Because it is readily available to anyone who looks for it. So diving into the history of the ketogenic diet. It is dated all the way back to 500 BC, but it was actually formally introduced as medical therapy in the 1920s. Now, when I say medical therapy, it was introduced for the treatment and cure for childhood epilepsy with difficult to control seizures and convulsions. So when we are talking about the ketogenic diet, almost any scientific study, when you initially type in keto or ketogenic diet, almost anything you find on that first couple pages will be in relation to almost exclusively childhood epilepsy. There is a reason for that. This diet was not necessarily created for, because we can't say anything was technically created for any specific purpose, right? You just kind of figure it out a little bit and for things like this, you see, oh my gosh, this has an incredible effect on childhood epilepsy or some other chronic condition. And you're like, oh my gosh, this works. So you test it and you try it out. Now, we'll get into this a little bit later, but some of the side effects that aren't the initial reason for conforming to this plan are eye-catching. And that's why it's gained so much popularity as a weight loss diet. But I want to be absolutely clear right now that this diet was introduced actually by a pair of Parisian physicians named, I'm probably butchering this, but Guelep and Marie in 1911. So that was the first actual kind of evidence we see of. Now they called it starvation as a treatment for epilepsy. And this was the first time it was recorded by these two Parisian physicians. Now, starvation is technically the same as ketogenesis, okay? We'll get into this in a little bit, the mechanics behind how all of this work. However, they did a little bit differently. The initial use of the ketogenic diet was used in conjunction with fasting. Now, there have been a couple extremists, and some of these studies are based off of one from this guy who, honestly, I'm not even sure is worth mentioning, because he recommended 3 days to 3 weeks of fasting. So literally starving your body. Now, you probably will experience a heavy decrease in chronic illnesses because your body's literally doing nothing else except for healing itself. However, very serious complications of starvation, as we all know. So any type of thing like this should always be closely monitored by a physician. So hear me on this. If you are currently doing any form of the keto diet, any form of a very restricted eating plan, you should only be doing that if you are working very, very close with your doctor. And I know we've kind of maybe put a little bit of stigma around that the past couple episodes, working with a nutrition professional versus a doctor. However, on things like this, we'll get into the complications here in a minute. These are very serious things that doctors test for. Okay, so they are monitoring your blood sugar, your cholesterol, your heart function, all those things that we typically think of for doctors. This is where they come in, right? So we've been a little bit elusive, but this is their role in the nutrition care process, okay? So just hear me on that. If you are doing a diet, you have to not only be honest with your physician, but you need to be working very closely with them, seeing them multiple times, getting your labs checked multiple times a year, if not every month. Because as you'll hear in a moment, this can be very, very dangerous. And I believe the dangers are not as heavily promoted, because the media loves to tell you, people that it's worked for them love to tell you that it's great, it works. However, you don't know what it's doing inside of your body because you can't see that unless you're working with the doctor very closely. So it's a little bit of a side tangent, but I want you all just to be aware that we're talking about keto today, but really anything like this that heavily restricts your calories or a specific macronutrient intake, you just have to be so careful, because as you'll hear, this is just not how our bodies are designed to function. So we're putting them at risk if we're trying to change those functions, right? So those are the first couple notes that I have there. The ketogenic diet does show a lot of help and aid and promise for treating childhood epilepsy. The long-term effects or using it in adults is not as highly studied. The goal here with this is, again, preventative medicine. So we're really looking at, using this in children and infants to try and nip it in the bud and really reduce or eliminate the need for treating it into adulthood. So I don't have much study on that because there just is not a whole lot yet. And the other problem is that adults that have epilepsy have typically already been on medication for epilepsy for so long that at this point it's usually pretty easy. They just take their medication and oftentimes they're fine. The ketogenic diet is also very highly touted for use in extremely difficult cases. So people that are having very difficult seizures, very long seizures, very, very frequent seizures. So a lot of times if, epilepsy is a very serious condition, however, there is a spectrum of it, as with anything. And people that are on that more moderate side, typically, the medications will work for them, and that's just the easiest route to go, and that's how we've been trained. And so for a lot of people, that isn't necessarily an issue, or they don't see it as an issue. But this is not a new thought. Again, this was introduced clinically in the 1920s, so it's been around for a very, very long time, but it's still not as widely used in children with epilepsy as maybe I would like to see. You'll hear kind of my opinion on it a little bit later, but these studies that are going to be in the show notes show you, lots of these kids, they are relatively small trial sizes, which I will say, when you see a scientific study, you really are hoping for a very large number of people, because that just shows you a better idea of how effective something is. That goes for drugs, that goes for vaccines, that goes for diets, anything in the medical realm. So these are relatively small sample sizes, but there are a lot of them. So you win some, you lose some, you get what you can get.
I think one thing that people should sit down and kind of break up is the type of fats that are being used too.
Absolutely.
Because we can go on and talk about how keto is used, to treat these conditions, chronic illnesses. But anybody sit down and ever explain saturated, polysaturated, monosaturated, and which one's good or bad? I think that's something that should definitely be touched on when explaining what the ketogenic diet is to people before they go out and, like I said in the last podcast, start eating egg and cheese with mayonnaise,
Right.
So, there's a big fat line that should be drawn right in between the sides of, am I going to do this ketogenic correct? Or am I just say I'm doing the keto diet so I fit in with all my friends that are doing it?
Correct. And that is another big thing I think that's very important to touch on, because this, in my honest opinion here, is just not an educated move for most people. Like you just said, when people are doing this, they're not sitting down and looking at, okay, where am I getting my fat sources from? They're looking at, am I meeting that goal for fat intake, which is one small part of a healthy habit. However, you have to make sure that you're doing it in a way that promotes health and not one that just gets you to your physical goals but is destroying your body on the inside. So that's actually one of these next points here, is that this diet plan, restrictive eating plan, does show some promise for diabetes management as well as Alzheimer's, that same kind of concept with the brain chemistry there as epilepsy. However, we have to be sure that we're monitoring it very, very closely to avoid offsetting those benefits with the negative outcomes of this diet. So some of the complications that are reported here. Now this is again in children, because the only time that it has been conducted in a clinical study or a clinical setting is when we are looking at children with epilepsy, okay? It just is a little bit mind-blowing that this is so popular in adults that just want to lose weight, because there is no research or evidence that it's necessarily safe for that one specific goal. Let me list off the complications here for you, and then we'll talk about, kind of what safe really means. So this is directly coming from a study in the Wiley Journal. It will be linked. Again, I do want to say that it is a small study, but scientifically, when we get into the how it works side, it will make a lot more sense. So the reported complications here: gastrointestinal disturbances, that includes diarrhea and dehydration, and constipation, as well as stomach pain. We've got, now these are not all of them, I also want to note, these are not all of the complications listed. These are the most serious and the most frequently reported. You have hypertriglyceridemia, hypercholesterolemia, which those two are high levels of triglycerides in your body and high cholesterol. We have symptomatic hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, multiple nutrient deficiencies. Now, long-term complications from this diet that are directly linked include cardiomyopathy, which has actually been a cause of death for some people on this diet, iron deficiency anemia, and low HDL cholesterol, which is the one we say is the quote-unquote healthy cholesterol. Now, some other complications that are noted enough to have separate studies conducted on them include selenium deficiency. This one is very important to touch on because selenium deficiency is very dangerous for people with thyroid issues. We'll get into that in another episode on thyroid specifically. However, this is concerning because a lot of people with thyroid malfunction try the keto diet because it does help with the weight fluctuation that a lot of hyper, Hashimoto's thyroid sufferers experience. But we want to, again, be aware of all of the factors here. So selenium is very important to thyroid regulation, and the ketogenic diet has been directly linked to selenium deficiency as well as multiple other nutrient deficiencies, including, but not limited to, iron, magnesium, sodium, all the things. Other ones are fat intolerance, which if you're needing medically a high-fat diet, that is a little concerning. And the final one, which is going to make a lot more sense to a lot more people here in a couple minutes: sudden cardiac death and other long-term heart conditions. Now, these are all complications that have been directly linked to the use of the ketogenic diet in children and some young adults that have been on this diet. Again, these are acute and long-term effects that were witnessed based on the sole change of introducing the ketogenic diet into their lifestyle. Okay, so you should be very aware of that. We have seen this linked. You'll hear me say linked. We cannot say that the keto diet causes these things. However, just be aware that when it was the only lifestyle factor that was changed, this is what you're looking at here. Okay, so many of you may go and look at these studies that we're going to link, and it's probably going to make no sense at all to you. If you don't know how to read these things, they're just very sciencey and a little bit jargony. I don't think that's a word, but we're making it a word. So lots of, again, that hypercholesterolemia, the hypernatremia, you guys probably don't know those terms. These are written for professionals to read and share information about. However, this information is not widely shared. So we're trying to break it down as best we can. All questions and comments are open, always. This is a safe place to get education, all right? So feel free to go and check these out. If you have questions afterwards, please come back and ask us. But just know that there are a lot of ways to kind of work around. There is a lot of legal stuff that comes into play with these studies and saying this causes, this cures. That's why we don't have a cure for cancer, or there's no quote unquote cure for epilepsy, even though we're sharing all of this research with you today. Just pretty much can't say things like that, which is understandable, right? There's things like that in every field, but just be aware that when we say link, this is in relation to a group of people that the only thing that was changed was their dietary intake. So these are complications that we note coincide with the ketogenic diet. They are very serious. As you heard, they can cause death. And this is where I have such an issue with people that say, oh, you know, my so-and-so was so healthy, they were young, they were in great shape. I hate that people use that as, you know, a substitute for maybe something was unexpected, because as we mentioned before, you can look great on the outside, you can lose all that weight, but that does not mean that you are healthy. Okay? Healthy has a very, very, very different meaning than physically looking good. They should coincide if you are living a truly healthy lifestyle, using balance, moderation, getting your advice from experts, from professionals. But if I can encourage you to do one thing today, maybe two, it would be to not do this diet. And if you do it with the supervision of a medical professional. And two, stop using the term young and healthy. Just because someone's young does not mean they're healthy. A lot of young people, we see this has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but a lot of young people maybe vape or are around people that vape or smoke often, excessive alcohol use. You guys, these are things that are not healthy. And you know what? I enjoy a drink every once in a while, okay? It's not the end of the world. However, using the blanket term young and healthy is creating a lot of damage, because we see people that are quote unquote young and healthy in their 30s, 40s, 50s having sudden cardiac death. And if they were on the ketogenic diet, they weren't just in their peak health. There was obviously something wrong with their internal health. You don't just fall over and die, typically speaking, okay? So that is the big bone that I have to pick. People want to go on all these restrictive diets and again, not work with medical professionals and not have the full story of what their health actually is, and then be so shocked when they have to go on these medications, or they have this really high cholesterol or blood pressure or like all these things, and it just is scary to me, and it is sad, and it is frustrating. So hopefully this information helps you become a little bit more aware of what's going on and choose to use some different adjectives.
I want to tailor what you were saying with the whole weight loss, feeling good, you know, young and healthy, to the mindset of athletes when it comes to the keto diet. Because you can definitely tie that in, because an athlete's number one priority is their performance, and they want to do good. But at the same time, nowadays everything's so magnified through imaging. Now they want to perform good, but they also want to look fantastic for all their friends. Now, the most important question as a trainer to the athlete is, what's your goal? Do you want to get better at performing, or do you want to look better? Because doing both is very difficult, and takes a lot longer than what you really want your goal to be. And the biggest, in my own experience, is a lot of bigger athletes, you know, like football linemen, you know, they want to lose some weight because they're not as healthy, but at the same time, they want to get stronger. And since it's such a fad now, they want to do the keto diet. And I'll tell you, there's a difference for the keto diet when it comes to aerobic exercise and anaerobic exercise.
Can you tell me really quick, why people want to do the keto diet?
Because it's fast. Because you can literally lose
quick
10 pounds in like a week and a half if you really wanted.
Correct. It is
Because
a quick fix.
Yeah.
But
yeah, when it comes to an athlete, you need those carbohydrates as your main source of fuel. Now, like I said, there's a difference between anaerobic and aerobic. All these anybody that's fast. So to make it easier understanding, anaerobic athletes are people or athletes that can use or do their exercise without oxygen. So let's say a 100-meter sprint. You can run that 10 seconds without actually having to start processing more oxygen through your body. Now, aerobic exercise is long distance running, somebody that runs a mile in track or a long distance runner. That's somebody that is going to oxidize and their metabolism is going to keep rolling. Now, in endurance athletes, there's actually proven studies to say that their fat oxidation is a lot higher in endurance athletes. And fat oxidation means the process of breaking down fatty acids. So anybody that is running for a long distance time, marathon runners, the keto diet actually might not be a bad thing, because since they're still going, they want a slow burning fuel, which fat is that kind of backup coal fuel to the body.
Correct.
If you have a football player that is going on a quick route that's 10 yards and they have to sprint as fast as possible, they need the most powerful energy that's going to rush into that muscle as fast as possible. That's the carbohydrates right there. Now, yeah, and an experienced athlete with mature muscles, they're going to have higher amounts of mitochondria, capillary density, all that good stuff in their muscles that not all fat diets can sustain and help. So there is a fine line when it comes to athletes, and I wanted to target athletes because the keto diet is something that needs to be advised. Like Bailey keeps saying, go to the professional, because if you don't, you're definitely, if you're an athlete, going to put yourself in the hole as far as risk or injury, and just you stay away from that, because pick your goal. Do you want to perform better or do you want to look good? So,
and it can be translated directly over to everyone that's not necessarily an athlete. Do you want to look better on the outside really fast, or do you want to promote health, reduce your risk for chronic disease, and take a little bit longer to look good
and feel better?
And feel better, have more energy, not feel sick. Another little side tangent here. Because this is raw and honest conversations with health professionals. Anything that the keto flu, I don't understand why people think it is a good thing to do something that literally makes you feel ill. What's the thought process there? If anyone can tell me, I'd be very grateful, because I don't understand. I hate to feel sick. I hate to feel not my best. Like, the holidays, of course, we indulge a little bit more. Last night, I had to come home and lay on the couch, and I was like zombie for an hour. Not a couple minutes. It was a whole hour and a half, maybe. And I just needed that. And I don't necessarily love that feeling. I did love getting to enjoy all that good food and enjoy time with my close family. And that makes it worth it to me. But I just don't understand the thought process. This is a personal comment here. It has nothing really to do with the science behind it. But I just don't understand. If it inherently makes you feel not well, in my opinion, it's probably not your best bet. So the reason why that keto flu happens is because of this process right here. So this is, if you take anything away, this is how ketogenesis works. The ketogenic diet puts your body into a state called ketogenesis, which is actually one stage of starvation. There are multiple stages, but ketogenesis is one of them. Now, This is coming from an article that I do actually encourage everyone to go take a look at. It did a very good job of explaining the breakdown, how everything works. It included lots of figures and drawings and showed you, like, this is where this takes place in your liver, this takes place in the mitochondria. I thought it was a great explanation resource. I will say it is not a medical journal or a clinical study. It is kind of a review, sort of overview type situation. And again, I do think it did a great job of explaining everything. Once I walk you through all the steps, you will probably start to see that from a scientific standpoint, this doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense why you would choose to do it. But it did help explain how it actually works. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Let me walk you through the notes that I took here. So how the keto diet works is that you essentially starve your brain. As we've talked about in the past, carbohydrates are your brain's main source of energy, fuel. So if you are taking away or only giving it a very, very, very low amount of carbohydrate, you're essentially starving your brain. This is, that first week where you feel that keto flu because you have no energy. Your brain's like, literally, what in the heck is going on? I don't know what to do anymore. So you're starving your brain, and so it has to go and look for something else to use because, I got to keep moving, guys. I got to go find something else. Now, fatty acids cannot cross the blood-brain barrier, which is why fats are not used as our main energy source. They are not the preferred energy source. It takes a lot for that to happen. What it takes is that you essentially, again, shut down your brain. It goes and looks for another source of energy. You then essentially shut down your liver and turn it into a ketone factory. So all that liver is going to really be focusing on right now is creating ketones, because since those fatty acids cannot be used by the brain, it's going to find another way to use fats as a source of energy. So those ketones are what essentially are going to produce the energy, but in a very roundabout way. So you turn that liver into a ketone factory. It's pumping out all these ketones, which are very scientific things that you really don't need to know about. Lots of different coenzymes and acetyl alcohols. Acetone is actually a byproduct of this process. Lots of things. We just call them ketones, okay? So the ketones are used by the mitochondria, which we know are the powerhouse of the cell. And the mitochondria actually take those ketones and create energy or produce energy. We know that energy can't be created or destroyed, whatever. But in this sense here, this is what we're talking about. The mitochondria use those ketones, they do their chemical process, and they make the energy. The energy is then sent out, can be used by the brain, and that is how your body is able to use fat for energy. So when you're looking at carbohydrates break down into sugars. They break down into different types of sugars based on the source that they're coming from. The preferred source is glucose. Glucose is what's used by the brain, by the body, by the cells to do cellular reactions and produce energy. It's honestly almost a one-off because that's how it breaks down. You just heard here, when you look at fats, your fats have to be intaked in consumed. We'll say consumed. Intaked is definitely not a word. They have to be consumed. Then they have to be changed in the liver. Then they have to be used by the mitochondria, and then they're able to be used. So instead of that kind of one-off process, you're looking at baseline 4 steps here. So the reason that this diet works is that essentially you are just burning more calories to get your energy. So what I'm telling you here is that there's nothing magic about the keto diet. It's not that your body has some underlying thing where fats really are the preferred energy source and we just have to hack it and figure that out and train our bodies. No. you are just bypassing the physical process of burning calories through exercise and movement and calorie deficit on your intake by using more calories to actually convert those nutrients into what they need to be used by the body.
Yeah.
So the ketogenic diet really is just a very energy expensive diet. So you lose the weight because you are burning more calories inherently because you are making your body do something it is not designed to do.
I would love to add,
Yes.
because it does bother me, and nobody ever really loves the truth. So, I always have to tell it. Do not use the keto diet as an excuse because you're afraid of carbohydrates making you gain weight or cause diabetes. The reason carbohydrates cause diabetes is because you don't work hard enough to burn those carbohydrates. And that's just plain and simple, and there's no cookie cutting around that. Carbohydrates turn into fat when they are not used as energy. Therefore, you develop those diseases. So if you can use those carbohydrates that you're consuming and turn them into fuel while you're working out, then you don't have to worry about it. The ketogenic diet, as we discussed, is probably the least of the options that you should pick as a diet. Carbohydrates are your friend. They are essential.
They are so much your friend. Oh my gosh, you guys, I've heard this quote before and it is 100% true. Happy people eat carbs. It's literally your brain needs them. Eating carbohydrates is linked to a decrease in anxiety and depression.
And
they taste great. They just make you happy. They release dopamine. It's just a good thing to do to eat carbohydrates, okay? We love them. There's a reason that we love them because your body loves them, okay? However, this is where we see the issue. Carbohydrates are your friend, but you are probably not carbohydrates' friend. So Tony kind of started to touch on it a little bit. You are really not doing yourself any favors if you're eating all of this heavily processed stuff. When we talk about carbohydrates being your friend, we are talking like baseline stuff here. Grains, potatoes, rice, things that you can get from the ground are your main line of defense, okay? Now, hear me out on this. People want to say that since bread is processed, because you have to make it, the bread is a bad carbohydrate. One, no food is good or bad. Food does not have moral value, okay? There is nutrient differences in food, but food itself does not actually contain the adjective good or bad, okay? Just doesn't. And two, bread is all bread is not created equally, okay? So I eat bread every day. The one that I choose to eat has nuts, seeds, and lots of other grains in it. So it has those other sources of good, healthy fats and carbohydrates and some protein from the seeds. And it has that fiber as well. So that's another thing we want to look at, which can be broken down a whole lot more. But carbohydrates, sugars are more easily digested and used when paired with fiber.
Yeah.
That's why we never recommend nutrition professionals, I should say. Starting to get into the diabetes conversation here a little bit. Nutrition professionals typically do not ever recommend juice because the fiber in the actual fruit from an apple or an orange is going to prolong that glucose release for such a longer period of time, and it's going to be better absorbed by the gut because of that extended release process. Okay, so again, another topic, conversation for another day, but just be very aware of the nutrient density of the foods that you're taking in. That's why the keto diet is linked to so many nutrient deficiencies. Another little history fact here is that when it was originally created, it was actually supposed to be high fat, low protein, low carbohydrate. Now we know that it's morphed into more of a high fat, high protein, low carbohydrate. And that's why we're starting to see more of these health complications, because the protein can lead to renal fatigue, kidney stones. It can cause other things. You're increasing your saturated fat intake, which is increasing your risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, so typically people are just not doing the ketogenic diet properly as it was originally intended. And the other thing that Tony really wanted to get into earlier, which I'll let him get back to now, is the fact that there is a proper way and a not so proper way to do the keto diet. And the proper way is to eat real foods, lots of fruits and vegetables and grains and lean proteins, not these bars and pizzas and other things that come out of a box that are quote unquote keto friendly, or the, egg and bacon and mayonnaise non-sandwich. So that is really the baseline. That's the research that I have here, the how it works, why, what it does.
I think we pretty much covered the base of it. It's just trying to get the listeners to actually understand our viewpoints of it and guide them. And I wouldn't tell them what to do, but at least get their mind thinking, okay, now that I heard what they have to say, let me go figure it out myself. Obviously, like we said, the purpose is to educate. We want you to educate yourself. We want to educate you, educating yourself.
Right. And that's the other thing. We are not trying to bash this diet or anyone that's on this diet and has experienced really great results. Maybe you've tried this and your labs, you have been working with your doctor and your labs are better than they've ever been, and you truly are experiencing health. That, if you told me that, I would believe you, because that tells me that there's probably some kind of underlying condition that maybe you don't know about, or maybe hasn't made itself fully aware, but that this eating plan is controlling that and it's helping your body function a little bit better. We're not saying that, again, you hear us all the time. We preach moderation and balance, and that can be done with this type of diet. It typically is not, though, which is why we have such strong feelings about it. And we have seen a lot of the negative impact side of it, which just is scary, because people think that they're doing something good for their body, but it isn't necessarily good for your body. Something else that I did want to throw out that I thought was a little bit of a scary fact is that most of those complications that you heard earlier, I'll touch on them again if you forgot. We have GI disturbances, hypertriglyceridemia, hypercholesterolemia, symptomatic hypoglycemia, nutrient deficiency, cardiomyopathy, iron deficiency anemia, low HDL, quote unquote good cholesterol, selenium deficiency, sudden cardiac death, fat intolerance. That's the main list, y'all. I didn't get into the nitty gritty. But most of those are actually also complications of obesity. So even if you're doing this diet to lose weight, if you are someone that needs to lose a large amount of weight because it's impacting your health, some of these complications that you run into on the keto diet are not any different than the ones you are staring in the face when you were at a really, really unhealthy weight. So I think that's a little bit concerning, especially given the fact that there are so many other ways to lose that weight in a much healthier way for your internal organs. So as a diet, speaking from a nutrition standpoint, back to the brain, your brain literally tries to make you fail when you're on a diet or restrictive eating plan, because it's just not how your brain functions best. You've heard me say it a billion times, I'll say it a billion more. When you restrict, your brain fights back because it wants what it wants, right? We say the heart wants what the heart wants, but really it's the brain that wants what the brain wants. And that's what tells you this is why we see such high rates of binging, developing binge eating disorders from diets, because when you restrict yourself, your brain makes you want it more. So eating small portions of it at a time, it just does better for your brain. Now, there are lots of different aspects of that as well that we're not going to get into today. But just know that if you are going into this or anything else with that diet mindset of, I have to reach this goal, I have to weigh this much, I have to fit in this pant size, I have to do it for this amount of time, your brain recognizes that signal and says, actually, I'm not a huge fan. Go eat that whole pack of Oreos, please and thanks. And then you feel really bad about yourself. You think that it's your fault. Now, I guess we could technically say it is, because you restricted yourself so much because you didn't have the correct info. So really, it's not your fault because you just didn't have the information to educate yourself on, which is why, again, it is so important to work with a professional in this aspect. We are always here to help people that are out there to help educate, aren't going to be giving you these quick fixes. They aren't probably going to be using the word fast ever, because true health and true results just don't happen fast, which we know from experience, we know from the science, we know from our education, which is what we're sharing with you today, which is why, really, long story short here, we are not huge fans of the ketogenic diet unless you have one of those medical conditions, or as Tony mentioned, you are that very specific group of athletes that really truly can benefit and utilize it properly.
Exactly. I like my car analogies. If you're driving a Ferrari and you pull up to the gas station, are you going to put the lowest amount of gas in there? Or are you going to put the highest quality gas in there?
Right.
So your diet is way more superior than your actual exercise is. Because if you don't have the quality nutrition, you're not going to perform well. And that goes with weight loss or an athlete. So like I said, pick your priorities, pick your goals and what you want to achieve. It is possible to do both, but if you really want to have that enjoyment, because it's not fun when you're doing both at the same time. It truly is not. And that's speaking because I've done it. And yeah, the results come. It takes a little bit longer, but at the same time, your mental health is just gone. It's terrible.
Right. And please understand that we're coming to you, both of us, from that standpoint today. We've both done a little bit of that probably too hard side, that little bit extra, and we were just struggling, suffering mentally, not necessarily enjoying everything, always thinking about, oh, what am I going to eat next? What do I have? Or what's my next exercise going to be? How can I burn the most amount of calories and really tone up in my abs? And we've both been there. And now we are both in a place where I will be 100% honest with you all. Most people probably will look at me and not think that I am a nutrition professional. I am not ripped. I am not as thin as I have been or could be, but I love my life so much right now and I enjoy every aspect of it. And that's so much more important to me than being the smallest or the most toned that I've ever been. And Tony can speak from a very similar place. And that's why we are being so honest and open with you guys, because we've been there and we know what it feels like. And it's so freeing to come out on the other side and know that you're doing truly what's best for your body. So just know that this is coming from the most caring, loving, genuine place in our hearts. And we just really want you to do what's best for you physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Like, it's so much more than probably what you're going through right now, especially at the holidays. It just is amplified for us right now because it's so hard for so many people to really feel that enjoyment and not feel like they have to work out or go to the gym twice every day this coming week. And there's just this different place that you can be living from. And that's why we're doing this, because it's just happy here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is all that I have. It was a lot. It was a lot of information today, and I know that it was a little bit longer than we anticipated, but we truly hope that this was all of the information that you needed to make a more informed decision for yourself and really feel more comfortable with seeking out health for yourself. So if you have any questions or you need a little bit more guidance, please reach out. We have a couple of holiday coaching opportunities running through January. I almost said June. Through January. And we are happy to help. We're happy to point you in the direction of professionals that are going to get you exactly where you need to go. So my hope for you is that this just really touched your heart and was a stepping stone for you in your health journey to really be aware and confident moving forward wherever you want that to take you. So we will be back very soon with some more research and studies on some different diets and things that you can be doing to seek out superior health in your life. Any questions, comments, concerns, coaching inquiries, please reach out. Check out the resources that we mentioned in the show notes. We will talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It was our greatest honor to take up space in your world today. Please share this episode to your social media pages and tag us at BeWellHWC. Cheers to you, friend, for choosing better for yourself starting today. It won't be easy, but it'll be worth it. Subscribe to the show and learn how to make healthy less hard, one tip at a time.